Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be able to introduce you to Dr. Stefano Bosi, who is the director of Maurizio Nobile Fine Art in Milan, but who also, along with the founder, Professor Enrico Lucchese, is a key member of a small team who have created the very new Archive of Secessions in order to promote knowledge of, and indeed give value to, the main protagonists of a revolutionary moment in the artistic life of Venice, which became recognized as the Secessionist movement in Italy in the early 20th century. He'll also discuss the very important relationship between the nascent Venice Biennale and the creation of Pesaro as a newly created haven for those young dissident figurative artists, and the exhibition held in both institutions during the same time. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Stefano Bosi. Welcome, Stefano.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank London Art Week, in particular Lux, Alex, and Francesca, for this talk and for the opportunity to preview the Archive of Secessions, Venice Biennale, and Pesaro, of which I'm a member. The Archive of Secessions was created 4 months ago. Its purpose is to shed light onto an important but still little known chapter of Italian art, the brief but intense years of the Venetian secession at Pesaro. The archive also analyzed the artistic events surrounding the international exhibition of the city of Venice, commonly known as the Biennale. Indeed, the secession of Pesaro would not have been possible without the Venice Biennale. I will shortly be discussing these two institutions, their history, their relationship, their differences, and, above all, the Secession Archive also aims to be a point of reference for scholars and collectors of this period of Italian art. This is only possible through research, which I and the other members of the archive want to share with various public institutions, such as universities and museums, but also through the retrieval and cataloging of painting and sculpture whose existence is currently only known through images published in exhibition catalogs. In order to achieve these goals, we are entering into a partnership with an important Italian public institutions. Once these can be officially announced, this agreement will make it possible to promote initiatives such as exhibitions, conferences, or scholarships. It would also be great to establish relations with other foreign archives so as to deepen the understanding of secessionist movements in Europe.
Presumably, Stefano, there will be a website.
Yes, it is in final development and will go live shortly. The site has a section dedicated to the archiving of works. Those who own paintings or sculpture by artists who have exhibited at the Venetian Biennale or at Pesaro can get in touch with us, send us pictures and any useful data for reconstructing the exhibition history of their work. This work will allow us to create over time a database where all the works are catalogued according to different search parameters. The archive's website also includes a library section where reference books and catalogs are listed. There is also a subsection where users can consult online articles or dissertations made available by the author themselves. Just click on the publication link to read the document.
So this sounds like a really important and groundbreaking initiative, which will seem to provide an invaluable resource to both scholars and collectors. However, as you say, Venetian secession art is not an area that is widely known about. Could you give us a little background?
Yes, this is indeed a complex subject. I will therefore limit myself to the most important facts. We are lacking general information on the Venetian artistic situation in the first 2 decades of the last century. By the end of the 19th century, Venetian art was already enjoying good health, thanks to the work of artists who specialized in genre painting, that is, painting that favored the depiction of scenes of popular life set in the city's most picturesque location. Another very successful genre is of views of the Venetian lagoon, of which the painter Guglielmo Ciardi is a major exponent. Despite being appreciated by Italian and foreign collectors, especially the British, these 2 types of work were still considered to be too provincial. Younger painters felt the need to open up the international art scene in order to update their language and subject matter. Things started to change in 1893 when the City Council of Venice proposed an international art exhibition to be held every 2 years. This was Italy's first international art exhibition, and it also would take Venice out of the almost stagnant position it was in after the unification of Italy, making Venice a cultural center of excellence and guaranteeing that Italian painters could compare with the European artistic experiences that I have just mentioned. The Venetian event challenged the artistic policy promoted at the time by the establishment in Rome, that's fueling the debate between those who consider it necessary to open the doors to modern international experiences and those who thought it more important to value the national artistic tradition. In reality, the choices made by the organizing committee of the first Venice Biennale, held in 1895 in the pavilions set up in the public gardens of Castello, which we are showing you here, followed the lines of taste that was already established and tested in the European field. In fact, the protagonists of the first Biennale in 1895 were the English Pre-Raphaelites. Many critics, however, lamented the absence of the French Impressionists. Also missing are the main exponents of the most modern European avant-gardes. Instead, there is a strong presence of artists belonging to the symbolist movement, whose works show affinities with the art of idea advocated at the time by official Italian culture. Despite its initial intention, the institution of the Biennale was soon placed under the control of the directors of the main European academies. It is they who direct the choices of which artists may or may not exhibit at the exhibition, and obviously the most penalized are those of the new generation. It was perhaps with this problem in mind that Duchess Felicita Bevilacqua la Masa decided in 1898 to donate her palace, Pesaro, and here you see it, to the Venice City Council in order to favor precisely those artists preventing from participating in public exhibitions. The Duchess died on 31 January 1899, and immediately the municipality of Venice accepted the donation, transforming the palace into the Bevilacqua la Masa Foundation, an institution that still exists today. Slide, please. However, it took 5 years before the foundation was formally established. This happened on 29 September 1905. Pesaro began to function earlier with the establishment of a young artist studio within it, as was foreseen in the Duchess's will. We don't know when the young Venetian artist settled in Pesaro. However, it is certain that this was before 1901. The following year, the city of Venice decided to move the Gallery of Modern Art, which had been established 5 years earlier, into Pesaro Grand Apartments.
This bequest of Pesaro effectively gave a great deal of hope to the most youthful avant-garde artists, giving them legitimacy, but also practically giving them somewhere, their own space, to gather and to work.
Yes, within a short time, the Pesaro institution began to take shape. What is still needed was a person to run it. In 1907, Nino Barbantini from Ferrara was appointed to this position, and with him, the foundation really began to function. Barbantini, who was only 22 years old at the time, we see him here, immediately set to work and already on 26 July 1908 managed to inaugurate the first exhibition at Pesaro. This was the first of a long series of exhibitions still in progress today that had so much influence on the development of 20th century figurative art in Venice. The role of Barbantini, who directed the foundation until 1930, was indeed important, not only for the growth of the Bevilacqua La Masa Foundation, but also for the affirmation of certain artists. With them, he shared joys and sorrows, difficulties and struggles to establish a new language. With Barbantini, the secessionist season at Pesaro began, which lasted from 1908 to 1920, also known as the season of the Pesaro rebels. In 1908, Barbantini even organized 2 exhibitions. Unfortunately, no catalogues were printed of these 2 exhibitions. However, we know from documents that 186 artists participated in them with a total of over 330 works. A number of young artists destined for a glorious career took part for the first time. They were the sculptor Arturo Martini and the painters Guido Cadorin, Nino Springolo, Guido Marusig, Gennaro Favai, and Gino Rossi, whose name is perhaps linked to Pesaro more than the others. Quite apart from the value of these 2 exhibitions, as well as those of the 2 set up the following year, it's important to emphasize how, for the first time, young artists were given the opportunity to exhibit their works and to compare themselves with the more established painters exhibiting at the Biennale. Barbantini wrote that the young people did not exist for the Biennale, and if someone managed to get in by chance, it was because their art was not that modern.
It sounds like the relationship between the Biennale and Pesaro was quite fraught.
From the very beginning of Pesaro exhibition activity, the clash with the Biennale became inevitable. Already with the first exhibition, the clashes began. In fact, Barbantini invited some already well-known Venetian artists, such as Guglielmo Ciardi, to exhibit alongside the young artist. This provoked a reaction by the Biennale's secretary, Antonio Fradeletto, who wrote a letter to Barbantini inviting him to stick to Duchess Bevilacqua's will, that is, to reserve the foundation's exhibition for young artists only. In 1908, there was another small incident with the Biennale related to the exhibition poster, slide please, designed by Guido Marusig, which, as you can see, provocatively reproduced the lion, symbol of Venice, but also of the Biennale. However, it was in 1910 that Pesaro began to assert its value and its function within the Venetian and the Italian art of the time. Only one exhibition was held in 1910. Only one exhibition was held in 1910, where two, slide please, extraordinary canvases by Gino Rossi, Il Muto and Fanciulle in Fiore, were exhibited for the first time. These works made Barbantini exclaim, "At Pesaro, youth had finally arrived."
1910 seems to have been quite a significant year in Italian art. Wasn't that the year the Futurist movement established itself?
Yes, and it was precisely in Venice on 27 April that the group's theoretician Filippo Tommaso Marinetti made a sensational gesture. During the Biennale, he threw leaflets from the Torre dell'Orologio in St. Mark's Square that read Venezia Passatista, meaning Old Venice, antiquated Venice. At the same time, another exponent of the group, the painter Umberto Boccioni, exhibited 32 paintings at Pesaro together with those of the young Venetian artist. You understand, therefore, how in a short period of time, the Bevilacqua La Masa Foundation's role and function of renewal was set in opposition to the Biennale's conservative role. Bear in mind that in the very Biennale of 1910, the director of Fradeletto decided to remove a painting by Pablo Picasso, who had painted the Demoiselle d'Avignon 3 years earlier, because he considered it too innovative, to the point that it could, in his opinion, arouse scandal among visitors.
Well, that's very interesting and rather amusing. Other than Gino Rossi, who you mentioned, who were some of the other artists exhibiting in Pesaro in 1910?
In addition to Gino Rossi and Umberto Boccioni, also exhibiting were Umberto Moggioli, Guido Marusig, Ercole Sibellato, Luigi Scopinic, Teodoro Wolferrari, and Tullio Garbari. These were the rebels of Pesaro, hostile to the official art of the Accademia and the Biennale. After the great success of the 1910 exhibition, the concept of the exhibition at Pesaro changed radically. From being the antechambers of the Biennale, as they were previously considered, they became real occasions of opposition to the great international exhibition in Venice. This opposition becomes even stronger in the following years. It is now open war between the two institutions. Their directors, Barbantini and Fradeletto, began to exchange very violent letters, sometimes even insults. At the opening of the Pesaro exhibition in 1913, and slide please, and here we see the catalog cover. For example, Fradeletto decided not to attend despite having been invited. He apologized by sending a letter to Barbantini in which he declared that he did not approve of the artistic orientation represented in that exhibition. At the same time, an article was published in a local newspaper, La Difesa, stating that it was a disgrace that one of the oldest and the most historic palaces in Venice, Pesaro in fact, was destined for, and I quote, futuristic functions. Moreover, the article even concludes with an invitation to the municipality to close down the exhibition. Barbantini recalls this fact in one of his writings, where he says that exhibition would have indeed been closed down, had not some Belgian artists who were exhibiting at the Biennale that year united in defense of the secessionists at Pesaro.
So how did the official artistic milieu of Venice react to this friction between these two institutions?
Not everyone was so closed and opposed to Pesaro innovation. Critic Gino Damerini intervened in defense of the rebels in a long article. So did Gino Fogolari, then superintendent of the Galleria dell'Accademia. However, the climate was difficult to the point that in 1914, Mayor Grimani did not authorize the annual exhibition at Pesaro. This is a very clear stance. To mitigate the situation, the Biennale jury was asked to admit the secessionists from Pesaro to the international exhibition. This did not happen, however, as the works of many of them are rejected. Among them was the sculptor Arturo Martini, who reacted by quickly organizing a kind of Salon des Refusés. This exhibition causes a lot of uproar because it is a real revolt against the Biennale, a sincere, authentic gesture of rebellion that would certainly have led to other resounding developments had not World War I come along to disperse the group of rebels at Pesaro. Many of them go off to fight. Tullio Garbari even crosses the Italian border to enlist with the Austrian army. We have to wait until the end of the war to see Pesaro active again. In 1919, an exhibition was inaugurated under an atmosphere of grief and sadness, given that in that very year, one of the protagonists of the Venetian secessionist movement, Umberto Moggioli, died prematurely of Spanish fever. You can slide, please. You can see that in the 1912 exhibition, an entire room was dedicated to his work. The following year, 1920, was instead the year of controversy, this time, however, within the Pesaro group itself. In fact, one of the rebels, the Turin painter Felice Casorati, was excluded from the exhibition on the absurd ground that had already exhibited in 1913. This fact gives rise to a real split. In protest, many secessionists decided not to take part in the exhibition at Pesaro, but to organize an alternative one of their own. This exhibition was held in the Geri Boralevi Gallery in St. Mark's Square. In addition to Casorati, Pio Semeghini, Emilio Notte, Arturo Martini, Gino Rossi, Vittorio Zecchin, Teodoro Wolferrari, and others participated. So, for the first time, the entire historical group of Pesaro is exhibiting outside the foundation headquarters. This not only marks the end of an unrepeatable period, but also signals the end of the great season of Pesaro.
Stefano, earlier on, you mentioned the Boccioni exhibition at Pesaro. I wasn't sure whether or not it affected the evolution of the artistic language of the Venetian secessionists.
Let's say that Boccioni exhibition has an immediate impact. His painting was striking due to his strong chromatism and unusual themes, such as the industrial suburbs. However, this painting did not leave a deep impression, at least immediately, among the young Venetian painters. Rather, it's other trends that strengthen and influence the taste of young local artists.
So which trends in particular?
It is mainly Secession and synthetism, the German word and the French primitivist esprit that characterize the central figure of the Pesaro movement.
Could you give us some examples?
Of course, on the secessionist side are Guido Marusig, Felice Casorati, Teodoro Bolferrari, and Vittorio Zecchin. Marusig assimilates the culture of German symbolism, softened in a decorative key. His works are distinguished by scenes devoid of a human figure and a total dedication to an allegorical landscape sensitive to the chromatism of Klim's secessionism and Whistler's style. Teodoro Wolferrari also looked to the Munich secession, at least until 1920, and then indulged in post-impressionist painting. Vittorio Zecchin, on the other hand, looked more towards the Vienna secession. Zecchin moves between East and West, between fairy tale and reality. His models were mainly Torup, Knopf, and Klimt, who were present at the Biennale in the early 20th century, but whose symbolist aspect he toned down.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Gino Rossi?
Gino Rossi is the most representative personality among the artists at Pesaro. He is a self-taught artist. He participated in the first exhibition of the Bevilacqua Masa Foundation with works that have so far not been found. And in this case, the Secession Archive could be very helpful in their recovery. Decisive for Rossi's education were the trips he made to Paris, Bruges, and Brittany, the study of primitives, the discovery of Van Gogh and Gauguin, the Breton group, and Serusier in particular, greatly influenced his work around 1909. Returning to Venice, he exhibited a free painting at the Pesaro exhibition in 1910, including the Fanciulla in Fiore. This work arouses astonishment. What was striking then, as it is now, is the maturity achieved by an artist whose formative period has not yet been reconstructed in any way.
Actually, in fact, looking at these two paintings together, you can clearly see the influence of Gauguin.
That's exactly right, Alex. Fanciulla in Fiore testified to Gino Rossi's successful assimilation of Gauguin's influence, but also of Van Gogh. The frontality of the image, the symmetry of the flower vases in the background, the prevalence of blue are all elements that have led scholars to interpret this portrait of a young Breton girl in a symbolic key reminiscent of Gauguin's La Belle Angèle. In composing the work, Rossi drew on the iconography of the Madonna of the Flower, especially the affinities with the flower, symbol of virginity, and the formal layout, reminiscence of the primitive painters.
So far, we've talked about painters, but you've told us before that among the rebels of Pesaro, there are also sculptors, such as Arturo Martini. Could you tell us a little bit about him briefly?
Yes, of course. I will tell you straight away that Arturo Martini is perhaps the greatest Italian sculptor of the last century. He's a real complex figure. One would have to do a talk on him alone. After the influences of the Munich secession, in 1912, he visited Paris together with Gino Rossi, where he somewhat moved on from this secessionist phase and moved closer towards expressionism. After returning to Italy, he organized a personal exhibition with Barbantini in 1913 as part of the annual exhibition at Pesaro, with works that testified to the various trends of his training, from Modigliani to Futurism, from Art Nouveau to Gauguin's Primitivism.
Is there one that's particularly significant in the works that he's exhibited?
There is more than one, but certainly the most significant one is Fanciulla piena d'amore of 1913, because here the artist condenses in his favorite material of ceramics all that he absorbed in Paris from his recent acquaintance with the works of Modigliani to the appeal of De Chirico's metaphysical painting. Here Martini distort this priestly pose of Modigliani's sculptures, using the raised head stretched both backwards and forwards on a long neck. The uniqueness of this ceramic also lies in its ambiguity. On the one hand, the title emphasizes the erotic aspect. On the other, the expressionistic rendering of the face, similar to a mask, suggests mourning or death.
Stefano, everything that you've told us is really quite enlightening. The story of Pesaro is fascinating, but also very interesting is to have understood how each rebel of Pesaro seems to have undertaken his own personal artistic journey. Before you finish this talk, I would like you, if possible, I know it's not easy, to condense everything you have told us into a few words.
It is not easy. Let's say that the Pesaro experience expresses a proposal of the avant-garde in a moderate fashion, taking an intermediate position that, while on the one hand opposes the academism and conventionality of official art, on the other hand distances itself from extremism.
Well, thank you. I think that was very clear. Now, we have had some questions, and if I may, I'd like to put one or two to you. The first one is about Barbantini, and you said, indeed, that he was very young. Can you tell us, I'm being asked here, can you tell us a little more about him and why he was chosen at such a young age?
Nino Barbantini arrived in Venice in 1907 when he was only 22 and was chosen for the position of secretary of the newly founded foundation at Pesaro. He came from Ferrara, had a law degree, and was a journalist and an art critic. His strongly worded series of articles in the Gazzetta Ferrarese, where he defended his city's artistic heritage, made an impact and helped win him the job. In fact, later articles of his, in particular on contemporary art in the Gazzetta di Venezia, were considered controversial by the fascist regime and were subjected to censorship. In addition to his work at Pesaro, he was also director of the Galleria of Modern Art. He was also responsible for the creation of the Museum of Oriental Art, inaugurated in 1928 in the top floor rooms of Pesaro. Then, in 1932, together with Napoleone Martinuzzi, he curated the reorganization of the Murano Art Museum. In 1936, he set up the Carezzonico Museum with Giulio Lorenzetti. In the end, he had a much easier time as a curator of exhibition of ancient art, both in Venice and other Italian cities, especially those dedicated to the Renaissance in Ferrara, to Titian and Tintoretto, which were very well received by the public and the critics alike.
Thank you. Another question we've had was the secession of Pesaro the only secession that took place in Italy at the time?
Absolutely not. There is also the Roman secession, which was founded in 1913, when the Pesaro events had long since begun. As its name implies, the Roman Secession declared itself in opposition to the official art imposed by the capital. In their exhibitions, we find the French Impressionists, the Fauve, such as Henri Matisse, and the painter of the so-called synthetism, such as Pierre Bonnard, Édouard Vuillard, and Maurice Denis. The Italian lineup, on the other hand, are quite different between themselves. We have the Pesaro artists, Rossi, Martini, and Casorati, and then those who develop divisionism, but in a more elegant and glamorous setting, such as Arturo Noci and Enrico Leone, or representative of Art Nouveau, such as the sculptor Leonardo Bistolfi. The works they put forward immediately provoked violent criticism, to the point that the initiative of the Roman secession ended after only 2 years, in 1915.
Yes, well, that certainly didn't last very long. Another question, are there any archives and specific studies on the subject?
Yes, they are. Firstly, there is the historical archive of the Pesaro Gallery of Modern Art. Then there are the private archives of the artists and art critics of that time. I can mention, for example, those of Gino Damerini and Luigi Scopinic. However, these private archives, rich with all kinds of documents, are not easily accessible. This obviously limits research. As for studies of the glorious season of the Pesaro rebels, they do exist, even if they are not so recent. The first fundamental contribution is by Guido Perocco, who in 1958 curated the exhibition Primi Espositori di Pesaro. However, the study that I still considered the most exhaustive today is the exhibition catalogue Gli anni di Pesaro, held between 1987 and 1988 at the Museo Correr in Venice, obviously. Here you can find critical essays that attempt to give an overview and analysis of the artistic period of Pesaro for the first time. In subsequent years, study have instead sought to focus on the major exponents of the Venetian secession. Despite everything, there is much to discover and investigate on this subject.
Well, thank you, Stefano, for this introduction to your archive. You can see on your screen, there's details of the website, and if you keep an eye on it, it's going to be going live soon. So if you want any further information in the meantime, let us know at London Art Week and we can put you in contact with Stefano. And indeed, if you have anything interesting or in your possession, any works that Stefano might be interested in including in the database of the archive, please do let him know. But further than that, what you've done is you've introduced us to a group of artists that, as you rightly say, are far less well known than their Northern European counterparts. And I think that's probably made us a little bit hungry for more, because their work is beautiful. And maybe it will give us food for another talk in the near future where we can examine their work more closely. So I'd like to give the last word to Stefano before I mention the next talk. So thank you so much, Stefano. The last word to you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you to London Art Week. Thanks to audience. And long live the Secessionists at Pesaro.
Indeed. And please remember, we have our next talk is Thursday, the 19th of October, this Thursday at 5 o'clock British time. And it's about the life of a public sculpture from inception to appreciation. Please register if you haven't done so already. And I hope that you're all enjoyed this series of Art History in Focus, and especially this talk about the Secessionists. Thank you so much, all of you. And goodbye.
Goodbye.